Good evening and welcome back to CNNMoney Switzerland and our ongoing coverage of coronavirus. I'm Olivia Chang. The number of people that have tested positive to the virus here in the country has now reached more than 21,000 as of Monday. In total, 582 people have died. The cantons of Ticino, Vaud, Geneva and Basel-Stadt continue to be the worst affected. The Civil Protection Department said that now over 5,000 officers have been mobilized, with over 1,000 of these being sent to Canton Vaud. Meanwhile, Geberit, the Swiss maker of sanitary products like toilets, has reported a nearly 4% drop in sales in Swiss francs for the first quarter of the year. The business has been dampened since middle of March as construction sites across the UK, Italy, France and Austria have been forced to close. Geberit employs about 12,000 people worldwide. Some of Switzerland's gold refineries have also partially resumed their operation this week after previously being forced to close. Companies like Argo Horace and Valcambi, both located in the canton of Ticino, said they had partly restarted their production but with a reduced workforce. The price of the precious metal surged today in global markets as the impact of the virus on the economy continues to prop up demand. The number of job postings in Switzerland has dropped sharply with the escalation of the virus across the country. According to Adecco, listings fell by some 26% in the 2 weeks after the government rolled out emergency measures on March the 16th. While some professions like catering have been badly hit, personnel in the food industry and in online retailing, for example, are still in demand, and of course, the medical sector. Staying within that field, drug giant Novartis says clinical trials will never be the same again post-coronavirus crisis. Over the last weeks, they've had to rely on technology to ensure that over 90,000 patients can continue to take part in life-saving trials. But Novartis maintains that a vaccine is still more than a year away. Take a listen.
I think as we begin to look, there's already about 20 different agents that are being looked at for antivirals that are being tested. In the longer term, I think that there's going to hopefully be a vaccine that will be developed, but that probably will take maybe a little bit longer than a year for us to find that solution. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find a solution in the near term.
And unfortunately, in the meantime, it means many of us have to stay in lockdown. Certainly here in Switzerland, it's not the case everywhere, but in Central Europe, we are working from home. And I want to know how that has impacted Novartis. How you mentioned, obviously, clinical trials can continue to go ahead, but are you able to have staff come to the office? Are you able to rely on supply chains?
We've been lucky because we have the ability to work from home, or many of us have the ability to work from home. Obviously, what's number one priority is the safety of our staff and employees that work there. We continue to have some employees who have to go in based on the lab work that we do. Given the importance of the work that we do to advance some of the clinical trials, as I mentioned earlier, we've had some timelines initiating new studies, whether that would be in managed access programs where patients are asking for some of our treatments. These are ways for us to accelerate and finding this as an opportunity to develop a new norm.
So the new technologies that you've had to implement very quickly at Novartis will become the new norm post-crisis?
We absolutely think that will be the case.
And how concerned are you about supply chains? Do you have any concerns about getting material to Novartis?
Yeah, so far we've been lucky in terms of supply chains. You know, as the world's gotten smaller, obviously the networks are very interconnected. But luckily to this point, we've been able to mitigate any concerns about getting drugs to patients.
But aside from the concerns about that, I mean, are you struggling to source certain materials at all?
Currently, at this point, we haven't seen any concerns that we've seen so far. Obviously, as this advances, we're continuing to monitor on a regular basis.
As governments continue to pump money into economies to help companies get through this period, BlackRock is warning of a return to the Eurozone crisis.
The fact is now that governments are spending billions to stem the crisis, which is good. At the same time, GDP will drop. So that, the public debt to GDP ratios will very likely go up, and this could actually lead some rating agencies to lower the credit rating of some countries, with the consequence that we might see a fallout in markets, and also maybe in Europe, for example, in the Eurozone, the need to come up with more stable solutions to stem and to prevent a return of the euro crisis, which was in part a government debt crisis. So the world will not be the same. There's also the question, will we see inflation or not? In my view, this depends on the length of the low in economic activity. But there are a number of questions. So the world will not be the same 100%, but pretty much so, especially if this recession is a relatively short one.
The world continues to face a shortage of masks to help protect against the coronavirus, but now reusable alternatives are being pitched as a potential solution. A Swiss startup has developed an antiviral filter that can be sterilized with ultraviolet light. Here's a closer look.
They are in high demand but short supply. Wearing a face mask during the coronavirus outbreak may be a controversial issue, but it's also a tech opportunity. Swiss startup Swoxid, based at EPFL, is using its core technology, a nanoporous aerogel filter, to produce reusable antiviral masks.
When we shine UV light on the filter, then this filter is producing a material which is very similar to hydrogen peroxide. And hydrogen peroxide is a very good disinfectant. So now we have an active filter which is not only filtering out the viruses, but killing the viruses in the filter if the filter is exposed to UV light. Because of this function, now we can reuse and sterilize the filter, and sterilize it and reuse, and the reusability would allow us to make masks which could be reused up to 1,000 times.
Swoxid's filter is made out of ceramic, which means it cannot be destroyed by heat or aggressive chemicals such as bleach. This makes it very different to the polymer fiber masks currently used. The Swiss startup is now looking for funding of 2 million Swiss francs to produce these masks on a commercial level.
Startup cost means all the acquisition of the production and all the marketing related and all the industrialization of this mask. Today, our production within the laboratory could be around 10,000 masks per month. And basically, this is the number that we envision now to start.
I can see that this COVID-19 somehow changed the business model of your startup. Is that something that you want to look into long term when it comes to doing these facial masks?
Yes. So yes, it completely changed our business model. So far, we were developing using the technology developed by Andre and all the team in the EPFL. The technology was focused on water purification applications, and all the products so far developed were focused for the water purification. With this situation, with the COVID, we realized that we can leverage the technology developed in the EPFL and leverage to use these filters for the mask. So we really want to participate in this fight against the coronavirus and help people who are in the front line, doctors and in the hospitals. And we believe that the technology needs to be leveraged for this kind of application.
Tanja König, CNNMoney Switzerland.
That's you nearly up to date, but just before we go, we'll leave you with this special image. It's the COVID-19 Solidarity Stamp released by Swiss Post today. Each stamp costs 5 francs and it's available to buy as a 10-stamp sheet, with all contributions going to those in need of help during the outbreak. The proceeds will be split 50-50 between the Red Cross and the charity Swiss Solidarity. In the meantime, you can follow up with all of our latest content and interviews by simply heading over to cnnmoney.ch. In the meantime, take care, stay safe. I'm Olivia Chang. Good evening.